Blockbuster didn't collapse because streaming was inevitable. This is a common misunderstanding, a simplified story we tell ourselves to make a complex failure feel predictable. The truth is far more structural and, for that reason, far more instructive. The company did not fail because a new technology suddenly appeared and wiped it out overnight. Instead, it crumbled from within, weighed down by a series of deliberate choices and ignored realities. The seeds of its demise were sown long before the world had ever heard of binge watching. It was a slow decay, not a sudden explosion, driven by internal forces, not just external disruption. The failure was rooted in three specific structural weaknesses. First, there was a deep revenue dependency on late fees, a practice that generated significant short-term profit but created long-term customer resentment. Second, the organization showed a profound resistance to transitioning its platform, clinging to the familiar comfort of brick-and-mortar stores while the digital frontier beckoned. Finally, a pervasive strategic arrogance blinded its leadership, causing them to underestimate a smaller, more agile competitor. These were not simple mistakes, they were systemic flaws embedded in the company's operating model and culture. They were the cracks in the foundation that would eventually cause the entire structure to fall. This isn't just a story about a fallen giant or a nostalgic look at a bygone era of video rentals. It is a corporate risk autopsy. We are here to dissect the exact risk signals that Blockbuster's leadership saw but chose to ignore. By examining these moments, we can understand the mechanics of organizational blindness and learn how to avoid making the same mistakes in our own professional lives and ventures. The goal is not to assign blame, but to extract timeless lessons about strategy, adaptation, and the hidden dangers of success. Today, we will dissect the choices that turned a market leader into a cautionary tale. This analysis is about seeing what they missed. It is about understanding that collapse is rarely sudden, but is almost always structural. In the world of business, as in engineering, the most catastrophic failures often begin with small, unnoticed stresses that compound over time. Blockbuster's story is a powerful reminder that what makes a company successful in one era can become the very anchor that holds it back in the next. The market was changing, the signals were clear, but the organization was built to protect its past instead of building its future. We will explore how this happened, step by step. To properly understand this collapse, we need a clear framework. We will evaluate Blockbuster's downfall through a model we call the opportunity blindness model. This model isn't about blaming individuals for bad decisions. Instead, it helps us see the systemic pressures and cognitive biases that cause successful organizations to miss game-changing opportunities. It shows how the very structures that create dominance can also create significant, often fatal blind spots. This model breaks down the failure into three core dimensions. It moves us beyond the simple narrative of technology killed the video store. The first dimension, short-term revenue anchoring. A company becomes dependent on a single, highly profitable revenue stream and cannot pivot even when that stream is threatened. The second dimension, platform transition resistance. The immense difficulty of shifting core business from physical stores to a digital ecosystem. The third dimension, strategic overconfidence bias. Past success leads leaders to underestimate new threats and dismiss disruptive innovations as niche or irrelevant. We are evaluating this collapse across these three structural dimensions. By applying this framework, we can move from a simple story to a sophisticated diagnosis. This structured approach allows us to see the interconnectedness of these issues and understand how they reinforced one another, creating a downward spiral from which Blockbuster could not escape. It provides a repeatable method for analyzing corporate failure and, more importantly, for identifying similar risks within any organization or career path. If you value structured thinking over surface-level advice, this channel is built for you. The lessons here are not just historical, they are practical. This autopsy promises more than just a look back at a famous business failure. It offers a practical resilience plan for you. After we dissect Blockbuster's mistakes through our framework, we will translate those lessons into actionable steps for your own professional life. We'll introduce a tool to measure your own financial dependency and a 3-step shield to help you build greater resilience and optionality. The goal is to equip you with the strategic foresight that Blockbuster's leadership lacked, ensuring you can navigate the inevitable shifts in your own industry without falling into the same traps. To understand the magnitude of Blockbuster's fall, we must first appreciate the height from which it fell. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Blockbuster was a cultural institution. It was the undisputed king of home entertainment. On Friday nights, millions visited its blue and yellow stores. Renting a movie was a ritual, browsing aisles, debating choices, grabbing a box of popcorn. It was woven into weekend life for a generation. Its market position seemed unassailable. At its peak, Blockbuster ran over 9,000 stores worldwide, serving tens of millions of active members. The brand was synonymous with movies. This physical presence was a powerful barrier to entry. Replicating that footprint would cost billions and years. To outsiders, Blockbuster looked like a fortress. Revenues reached nearly $6 billion annually in the early 2000s. That gave Blockbuster huge leverage with Hollywood. It was the single largest customer for new releases on VHS and later DVD. It negotiated exclusive windows and favorable terms. That dominance fed a self-reinforcing cycle. Vast selection drew customers. Mass customers gave content leverage. From outside, the model looked perfect and stable. Internally, that feeling of being untouchable was ingrained. Leadership treated stores as the greatest asset. Success was measured in store traffic, membership, growth, rental transactions. The whole company was optimized to run the retail machine. Non-physical business models felt peripheral. The kingdom seemed vast and secure, and that was the context when the first warning signs appeared. Blockbuster's dominance was built on a simple yet highly effective business model centered on physical distribution. The company mastered the logistics of getting physical media, first VHS tapes, then DVDs, into the hands of consumers. Its core value proposition was convenience and selection. Instead of waiting for a movie to air on television or buying it outright, customers could rent it for a few dollars for a few nights. This model capitalized on the public's growing appetite for on-demand entertainment. The company built an empire by solving a straightforward problem. People wanted to watch movies at home on their own schedule. A critical component of this model and a key factor in its eventual undoing was its revenue structure. While rental fees formed the base of its income, a significant portion, estimated to be as high as 15% of total revenue, or over $800 million per year at its peak, came from late fees. These fees were incredibly profitable. They required no additional inventory and no extra labor, representing almost pure profit. From a purely financial perspective, they were a brilliant mechanism. Every time a customer returned a movie a day late, the company's bottom line improved. This created a powerful internal incentive to maintain the late fee system. This reliance on late fees, however, created a fundamental conflict with customer satisfaction. While the company profited from them, customers hated them. Late fees were a constant point of friction, a source of frustration that slowly eroded goodwill. Yet, inside the company, these fees were not seen as a customer relationship problem. They were viewed as a vital profit center. Executive compensation and store performance metrics were often tied to revenue targets that were heavily supported by this income stream. Any strategic decision that threatened this revenue, even if it promised long-term benefits, would face immense internal resistance. The organization was financially addicted to a practice its customers despised. Success, especially on the scale Blockbuster achieved, has a dangerous side effect. It breeds complacency. When a company dominates its market so completely, leadership can begin to believe its own narrative of invincibility. The strategies that built the empire become sacred, and the assumptions underpinning them go unchallenged. For Blockbuster, the core assumption was that people would always want to rent movies from a physical store. This belief was reinforced daily by millions of transactions across thousands of locations. The system worked, so the incentive to question it was low. Innovation, especially the kind that might cannibalize existing revenue streams, was not just discouraged, it was seen as a threat to the established order. When the first DVD by mail services appeared, they were small and catered to a tiny segment of early adopters. Why worry about a small service that mailed movies in red envelopes? Blockbuster's leadership saw them not as a fundamental challenge to their distribution model, but as a minor competitor in a vast market. This is a classic symptom of what we call strategic overconfidence bias. The dominant player underestimates the challenger because the challenger's initial market is too small to seem relevant. The very things that made it strong, its massive physical footprint, its powerful studio relationships, its profitable late fee model, became anchors weighing it down. The organization was structurally incapable of embracing a future that looked radically different from its present. The seeds of complacency, planted during years of market leadership, were beginning to sprout, just as a new and far more dangerous competitor was preparing to change the rules of the game entirely. The opportunity blindness model provides a structured way to understand why successful, well-managed companies so often fail to see the next big thing. It is not about incompetence or a lack of intelligence within leadership. Instead, it highlights the systemic forces that create blind spots at the very top of an organization. Blindness is a structural problem, not an individual one. A predictable outcome of success. The model is built on three interconnected dimensions that explain how a market leader like Blockbuster could look at Netflix and see a nuisance, not a threat. Revenue anchoring, platform transition resistance, strategic overconfidence bias. When combined, they create powerful inertia that paralyzes dominant companies. It's easy to call Blockbuster foolish. It's harder and more useful to see the organizational pressures that made the choice logical then. Our goal: dissect how each dimension applied to Blockbuster. Define the risk. Present the historical evidence. Identify the ignored warning signals. Explain the structural consequences. Let's begin with the first and most powerful dimension: revenue anchoring. Short-term revenue anchoring is the tendency of an organization to prioritize and protect its most significant and reliable current sources of income, even at the expense of long-term strategic adaptation. For Blockbuster, this anchor was its late fee policy. This single revenue stream generated an estimated $800 million annually at its peak. It was immensely profitable and became a non-negotiable part of the business model. It was an addiction that felt too good to quit. Any strategic proposal to eliminate late fees was met with fierce resistance from financial executives. The numbers were simply too compelling. Dropping late fees meant sacrificing hundreds of millions in near pure profit. From a short-term, spreadsheet-driven perspective, it looked like financial suicide. The warning signals were abundant but ignored. The most obvious signal, widespread customer dissatisfaction. Another signal, the rise of competitors. Netflix, Redbox, both promised no late fees. This directly attacked Blockbuster's biggest customer pain point. Instead of changing, leadership defended the profitable model even more vigorously. They were protecting revenue, not the customer relationship. But here's where it became dangerous. The structural consequence was a dramatic reduction in strategic optionality. By refusing to abandon late fees, Blockbuster couldn't compete with Netflix on customer convenience and value. It locked them into a punitive business model, while the market shifted toward a model that was permissive, flexible. The anchor didn't just cost money, it cost the ability to adapt. Platform transition resistance. Platform transition resistance describes an established company's difficulty in shifting from its core, highly optimized platform to a new and unproven one. A platform is the fundamental way a business creates and delivers value. For Blockbuster, this was its network of physical retail stores. This platform was a masterpiece of logistics, real estate, retail management, perfected over 2 decades. It was the engine of the company. The idea of transitioning away from this tangible, successful asset toward an intangible digital platform seemed abstract, risky, and enormously complex. The evidence of this resistance is visible in Blockbuster's hesitant and under-resourced forays into the digital world. The company launched Blockbuster Online, but it was treated as a separate, secondary business rather than the future of the company. There was a fundamental internal conflict. Every customer who signed up for the online service was one less customer walking into a physical store. The warning signals were stark. Declining foot traffic in stores was a clear indicator that consumer habits were changing. The explosive growth of Netflix subscribers demonstrated a powerful market appetite for a home delivery platform. Furthermore, the rapid adoption of broadband internet and early streaming patterns signaled that the entire media landscape was on the verge of a seismic shift away from physical media. But here's where it became dangerous. The structural consequence of this resistance was the loss of distribution control. Blockbuster's greatest asset, its 9,000 stores, was rapidly becoming its greatest liability. The platform that had built the empire was now a costly, inflexible anchor, preventing it from sailing into the new world of digital distribution. Strategic overconfidence bias. Strategic overconfidence bias is a cognitive trap where past success leads leaders to an exaggerated belief in their own judgment and an underestimation of new disruptive threats. The most famous piece of evidence for this bias is the meeting in 2000 where Reed Hastings offered to sell Netflix to Blockbuster for $50 million. Blockbuster's CEO, John Antioco, reportedly struggled to keep a straight face and rejected the offer outright. From his perspective, Netflix was a small, money-losing, mail-order business. Why would a $6 billion global empire buy such a tiny, unproven operation? This wasn't just a financial miscalculation. It was a failure of imagination fueled by arrogance. The signals that should have challenged this overconfidence were both external and internal. The persistent growth of Netflix, even in its early days, was a clear external signal that its model had market appeal. Internally, there were likely junior executives and strategists who saw the digital writing on the wall, but their warnings were filtered out or dismissed by a confident leadership team. But here's where it became dangerous. The structural consequence of this bias was profound decision-making complacency. It led Blockbuster to consistently make the wrong strategic choice at every critical juncture. They chose to laugh off Netflix instead of acquiring it. They chose to dabble in online services instead of committing to them. They chose to protect their existing model instead of inventing a new one. This overconfidence created a fatal delay in their response. By the time Blockbuster's leadership finally recognized the true scale of the threat, they had already lost the war. The game had changed, and they were too late to learn the new rules. With the strategic reversal in 2007, Blockbuster entered its final phase, an accelerating, irreversible collapse. While Blockbuster was trying to squeeze the last profits from its physical stores, Netflix was making its most important leap. In 2007, Netflix launched its Watch Now streaming service. Blockbuster was now multiple steps behind. It had failed to win the DVD by mail war and was not even on the field for the new streaming war. The market response was swift and brutal. Customers left in droves for the superior value and convenience of Netflix's subscription and streaming service. Store traffic plummeted and rental revenues evaporated. The financial impact was catastrophic. The company's massive retail footprint, once its greatest strength, became an anchor of immense cost. Leases on thousands of underperforming stores drained its remaining resources. The structural weaknesses that had been developing for a decade were now causing a complete systemic failure. In September 2010, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The end was not a sudden shock. It was the slow, predictable, and structural outcome of a series of choices made over 10 years. Blockbuster's story is a clear demonstration. Collapse is rarely sudden, it is structural. Blockbuster's story is not just about a failed company, it is a lesson in structural risk that applies to your professional life. The company didn't collapse because streaming was inevitable. It collapsed because it protected late fees, a single, dominant revenue stream. That choice prevented it from adapting. Revenue anchoring. Now a practical tool for your life. We can measure this with a simple metric, revenue concentration ratio. To calculate it, income from primary source divided by total income. Example, 100,000 per year from your job, no other income, ratio IL 1.0 or 100%. If your revenue concentration ratio is above 80%, you are structurally anchored. Optionality is low. Like Blockbuster, you're incentivized to protect the main income even as the market changes. That dependency makes you less adaptable. Ask yourself these diagnostics. First, where are you over-dependent? Single skill, single industry, single professional network. Second, what revenue are you protecting at the expense of adaptability? Finally, what signal are you ignoring? Once you have diagnosed your exposure, the next step is to build a defense. We call this the 3-step resilience shield. The first step is to build a 6 to 9 month liquidity floor. This means having enough cash in an accessible savings account to cover all of your essential living expenses for at least half a year. The second step is to develop a secondary income stream, even if it is small. The goal here is not necessarily to replace your primary income, but to diversify your financial inputs. The third and final step is to reduce your fixed obligations by 5 to 10%. By systematically reducing these costs, you increase your free cash flow. To turn these concepts into concrete results, you can use a simple 30, 60, 90-day plan. 30 days, diagnose. 60 days, adjust. 90 days, diversify. In the first 30 days, Your focus is to diagnose your exposure. Your primary task is to calculate your revenue concentration ratio with precision. Conduct an honest audit of your skills and your industry. The next 30 days are for structural adjustment. Your primary goal in this phase is to make progress on Step 1, liquidity floor, and Step 3, reducing fixed costs. In the final 30 days, you begin to diversify your risk. This phase is dedicated to Step 2, developing a secondary income stream. The goal by day 90 is to have taken the first concrete step toward creating one. The story of Blockbuster is often told as a simple fable of technological disruption, but the truth is more complex and far more instructive. The 3 dimensions of the opportunity blindness model, short-term revenue anchoring, platform transition resistance, strategic overconfidence bias, show a failure woven into the fabric of the company's success. This autopsy provides a clear blueprint for avoiding the same fate. The lessons apply beyond the C-suite to anyone navigating a changing professional landscape. Be prepared to cannibalize what is successful today to build what is necessary for tomorrow. Blockbuster's legacy is a warning. Clinging to something old until it is too late is the greatest risk. What early signal do you think they ignored most? The patterns of corporate failure are often remarkably similar. In our next Corporate Risk Autopsy, we will turn our focus to another fallen giant, Kodak. While Blockbuster's failure was rooted in its resistance to a new distribution platform, Kodak's story is a case of true innovation suppression, actively stifles a disruptive technology that was born within its own walls. Join us next time as we dissect the mechanics of innovation suppression and extract the lessons needed to ensure that the next great idea, especially if it is your own, is nurtured, not buried. The link to that episode is on your screen now.